It began like any other show. Lights on, cameras rolling, the hum of a live studio ready for another perfect take. Zoltán Lantos, one of Hungary's most respected music stars, stood on stage in Sweden for a televised performance that should have marked another triumph in his long career. Instead, it would mark his end. What happened next stunned everyone in the studio. One moment he was performing, the next he was on the ground, motionless, as the music came to an abrupt stop. Within minutes, the broadcast cut to chaos. Viewers didn't yet know it, but they had just witnessed the final moments of a man who had lived and died for his art. Zoltán Lantos, the collapse that sparked questions. For decades, Zoltán Lantos had been celebrated as one of Hungary's most disciplined and quietly brilliant musicians. He wasn't the kind of artist who craved attention. He earned it. Known for his calm precision and deep respect for craft, Lantos built his reputation on passion, not spectacle. Fans admired his humility, his almost meditative stage presence, and the way he could hold an audience in silence before a single note was played. In late 2024, he was invited to perform in Sweden as part of a live television concert featuring several European artists. It wasn't a massive arena performance. More of an intimate broadcast, the kind of setting Lantos preferred. The production team later said he had been in good spirits that morning, rehearsing with quiet focus, sipping tea between takes, smiling politely at the crew. There was no sign of fatigue or illness. Then, during the live taping, something changed. About halfway through his set, witnesses said his color faded. His right hand seemed to tremble as he held the microphone. For a moment, he looked confused, as if trying to steady himself. Then, without warning, he staggered and collapsed in front of the audience. The broadcast froze as producers rushed to cut the feed. Crew members and medics ran to him within seconds, but he never regained consciousness. By the time he reached the hospital, he was pronounced dead. The official cause: a massive heart attack. He was 52 years old. News of his sudden death spread across Europe within hours, and so did the rumors. Some media outlets in Hungary and Germany suggested there was more to the story. They questioned how a healthy performer with no known heart issues could collapse so suddenly. A few tabloids even floated darker theories, hinting at possible poisoning or foul play. Others noted that Lantos had recently spoken to close friends about feeling followed and had been working on a politically sensitive music project connected to European cultural funding. His family and colleagues dismissed the claims as disrespectful conspiracy, insisting that stress and exhaustion were the real culprits. But the speculation refused to die. Online forums dissected every frame of the footage, every pause in his last performance, searching for clues. What made Zoltán Lantos's death so haunting was not only its suddenness, but also its visibility. His final moments were caught on camera, recorded, archived, and replayed endlessly. To his fans, it became a tragic symbol of how fragile fame can be. 1 second filled with applause, the next consumed by silence. He died doing what he loved most, performing. But the questions that followed ensured that peace would come only to the music, not to the story behind it. Goodbye to Gravity, the concert that burned a city. October 30th, 2015, Bucharest, Romania. What began as a celebration of music became one of the darkest nights in the nation's modern history. Inside the collective nightclub, around 400 fans gathered shoulder to shoulder, ready to see one of Romania's most promising metal bands, Goodbye to Gravity, launch their new album Mantras of War. The venue, a repurposed factory basement with concrete walls and low ceilings, had long been a favorite for underground concerts. Few noticed that its only exit was a narrow metal door, or that the ceiling was lined with cheap soundproofing foam never meant to face heat or fire. At 10:32 p.m., the band launched into their song The Day We Die. The title, in hindsight, felt like prophecy. To mark the occasion, the crew lit 4 small indoor pyrotechnic fountains, a simple visual effect, used countless times before. But this time, the sparks reached the foam panels above the stage. Flames erupted instantly. Within 20 seconds, smoke spread across the ceiling. Within 1 minute, fire engulfed the room. Witnesses would later say the fire moved faster than sound. At first, the crowd cheered, thinking it was part of the show. Then came the screams. Power failed. The lights went out. In the darkness, panic took over. Dozens tripped and fell as the stampede pushed toward the single exit. People clawed at walls, trying to find air. Those who made it outside described hearing the cries of others trapped behind them, fading with the flames. By the time firefighters controlled the inferno, 64 people were dead, including 4 members of the band: Vlad Telea, Alexandru Bogdan, Mihai Alexandru, and Alex Pascu. More than 180 others were injured, many suffering severe burns and smoke inhalation. Alex Pascu was still alive when rescuers reached him, but he died hours later at a hospital in Switzerland after being transferred for treatment. Romania went into mourning, but grief soon turned to rage. Investigations revealed that Collective had no fire safety permits and had passed inspections through bribes and political favors. The scandal ignited a wave of national protests. Tens of thousands filled the streets of Bucharest demanding accountability. Within days, the Prime Minister and his cabinet resigned. For the families of the victims, there was no comfort, only grief and endless questions. The fire exposed not just the negligence of a system, but the cost of corruption, lives lost in exchange for shortcuts. The video of that night still exists online. The band playing joyfully, smiling at the crowd, the stage lights warm and golden. None of them knew that in a matter of seconds, those lights would turn to flames. It was supposed to be a celebration of music. Instead, it became a requiem for an entire generation. Tiny Tim, the last laugh that never came. By the mid-1990s, Tiny Tim was more than just a novelty act from the 1960s. He was a living relic of another era. With his falsetto voice, eccentric manners, and trademark ukulele, he had once captivated America with his hit, Tiptoe Through the Tulips. But behind the gentle smile and flamboyant suits, Herbert Cowrie, the man the world called Tiny Tim, was struggling. Years of poor health, financial pressure, and an unrelenting schedule had worn him down. On November 30th, 1996, Tiny Tim appeared at a charity gala in Minneapolis. He had been advised by doctors to stop performing after suffering a previous heart attack earlier that year. Yet he refused. "The people need me," he told his wife, Miss Sue Gardner, before going on stage. Those words would soon haunt her forever. Midway through his performance, witnesses said Tiny Tim looked pale and began to wobble. Still clutching his ukulele, he smiled faintly and tried to continue the song. Then, quietly, he said, "Excuse me?" and collapsed. The audience gasped. Paramedics were called immediately and rushed him to the Hennepin County Medical Center. Moments later, he was pronounced dead. He was 64. His wife later recalled that in his final weeks, he seemed at peace, almost as if he knew his time was near. "He died doing what he loved," she said softly. "He wanted to go out singing." For fans who grew up with him on The Tonight Show and Laugh-In, it was a surreal loss. The man who had spent his life making people laugh had taken his final bow in silence. Tiny Tim's death marked the end of a strange, beautiful, and often lonely journey. He had spent decades searching for acceptance, clinging to his music as both shield and sanctuary. In the end, the stage that had once given him life became the place that took it away. Barbara Weldon's The Electric Night That Ended Too Soon. On the warm summer night of July 19th, 2017, the small village of Gourdon in southern France was alive with laughter and song. The Leo Ferré Festival had become an annual celebration of poetic music, and the evening's headliner, Barbara Weldon's, was its rising star. At only 35, she had the promise of a long, glittering career ahead. Critics compared her to Piaf and Brel, a voice both fragile and fierce, raw yet elegant. She took the stage barefoot, as she always did, a personal ritual that made her feel grounded. The crowd leaned in, captivated by her energy. Then, as she began another song from her debut album, Le Grand Âge de l'Homme, something went wrong. A short circuit from a faulty cable sent an electrical surge through her microphone. Weldons froze mid-phrase, let out a soft gasp, and collapsed. The audience thought at first it was part of the performance, a dramatic ending to a song. Then the silence became unbearable. Paramedics rushed to help, but there was nothing they could do. She had been electrocuted instantly. The show ended in chaos and disbelief. Hours later, French police confirmed that a technical malfunction in the stage's wiring caused the fatal accident. There had been no safety inspection before the event. Her friends said Barbara had been nervous that day, worried about performing outdoors. Still, she went on, because the show must go on. Her death sent shockwaves through France's music world. She had only just begun to taste fame, performing at festivals across Europe. Her songs filled with wit, melancholy, and rebellion. The next morning, radio stations played her songs non-stop. For many, the haunting irony was impossible to ignore. A performer who sang about life's volatility, silenced by the very tools of her craft. Her last words, recorded moments before the tragedy, would become her epitaph. Je veux chanter la vie. I want to sing life. Juan Jumelón, the broadcast that turned to horror. On the morning of November 5th, 2023, the quiet town of Calamba in Misamis Occidental, Philippines, awoke to a routine, familiar sound, the cheerful voice of Juan Johnny Walker Jumelón on 94.7 Gold Mega Calamba FM. His show had always been light-hearted, filled with jokes, dedications, and morning greetings. Jumelón wasn't a political host, nor was he controversial. He preferred laughter over conflict. That's why no one could have imagined what would happen next. At around 5:30 a.m., Jumelón was midway through his broadcast, chatting with listeners on Facebook Live, when two men arrived at his home studio. They claimed to have an announcement about a lost wallet. Moments later, one of them pulled a gun. Jumelón looked up from his desk, and before anyone could react, 2 shots rang out. He collapsed instantly, still seated in front of his microphone. The entire incident was streamed live on social media and captured by CCTV cameras inside the small studio. Viewers initially thought it was a prank, until the feed cut abruptly. The attackers fled on a motorcycle, taking with them Jumelón's gold necklace. Police later confirmed the motive was still unclear, but early evidence suggested it was a planned hit. He was 57 years old, a husband, and a father. Friends described him as gentle, generous, and apolitical, a man who loved radio because it connected him with people, not power. His death sparked outrage across the Philippines and drew condemnation from press freedom groups worldwide. Listeners who had tuned in for their daily smiles found themselves witnesses to a murder. For days afterward, the station played his old recordings, his laughter, his good morning greetings, as a tribute. The sound of his voice became both comfort and curse. He had spent his life giving people a reason to start their day with joy. And in one brutal instant, that voice was gone. Lillian Harden Armstrong, the pianist who played until her heart stopped. By the summer of 1971, Lillian Harden Armstrong had already lived through half a century of jazz history. Born in 1898 in Memphis, Tennessee, she was a trailblazer, a composer, bandleader, and the second wife of the great Louis Armstrong. Together, they had shaped the sound of early jazz. But after their divorce, she built a quiet career of her own, teaching, recording, and performing with an elegance that never faded. When Lewis died on July 6th that year, Lillian took the loss deeply. She said, "The world lost its trumpet. I lost my heartbeat." Weeks later, she was invited to appear at a televised memorial concert in Chicago to honor her late husband. Friends urged her to rest. Her health had been fragile for years, but she insisted, saying she wanted to play St. Louis Blues one more time for him. On August 27, 1971, she walked onto the stage in front of the cameras and an audience that adored her. As she began to play, witnesses said her expression softened, a mixture of grief and grace. Midway through the song, she faltered. Her hands lingered on the keys for a moment, then went still. The band kept playing, thinking it was part of the arrangement until they realized she was slumped over the piano. Paramedics rushed in, but it was too late. Lillian Harden Armstrong had suffered a massive heart attack and died on the way to the hospital. She was 73. Her death shocked the jazz world, yet many said there was poetry in it. A woman who had lived for music, leaving the world while playing it. In that final performance, she joined the man she had loved, her last notes dissolving into silence, forever linked to the heartbeat of jazz itself. They say the stage never lies. For these artists, it became both the proof of their passion and the witness to their final moments. From Zoltan Lantos's sudden collapse on live television to Lillian Harden Armstrong's final song for the man she loved, each story reminds us how fragile life can be, even for those who seem larger than it. These weren't just performers. They were people who gave everything to their craft until the very end. The lights, the applause, the cameras, all of it faded into silence, leaving only their legacy behind. Which of these stories moved you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories about the final moments that changed music and history forever.